Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dials, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value and for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. And today, we have with us our first three-peat guest, Elizabeth Mower from the Business Enterprise Institute. Elizabeth, she's the president of BEI and leads that organization in the development of resources, information, training, software, a whole lot of stuff to enable professionals like us and in a variety of disciplines like accounting, legal, wealth management, business consultants, et cetera, to work with business owners in designing and implementing comprehensive exit plans. She's an attorney. Before joining BEI, was in private practice, serving clients with exit planning, of course, business continuity planning, estate planning, because you can't do exit planning without doing estate planning, and business transactions. She's an expert on anything and everything technical or process related pertaining to exit planning, but also because of her role as president of BEI, she's in tune with and has some expertise on the overall state of the exit planning industry, if you will, as it pertains to both business owners and advisors. So in today's episode, we want to get Elizabeth's big picture perspective on this crazy year, 2020, that we're wrapping up, and then look forward into 2021 and see what she's thinking about that too. And then also toward the end, we want to leave you with a simple planning strategy for the first 90 days of the new year to help you plan now. You've heard that message from us over and over, and you're going to hear it again today. You can't start planning soon enough. So we're going to give you a simple 90-day plan. Keep things simple, short term, and in order to get things done long term. I just thought of that today. So Elizabeth, always great to have you with us. There's no one better to be our first three-peat guest. Thanks again for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Pat. Walter, you guys are a lot of fun to talk to. So to me, it's just the same as catching up with friends. And we happen to talk about interesting topics related to business that I think are fun to talk about anyway. So I'm always glad to come on. Thank you.
Fantastic. We appreciate that, Elizabeth. Now make sure you update your resume to say that you are the only person to appear on the Exit Readiness podcast 3 times.
You know, Walter, I already did that this morning in anticipation of this exciting moment. So, and I'm going to put it out. I have 14 Twitter followers, so I'll be letting them know.
Fantastic.
She's got her whole PR team working on that already, Walter.
So Elizabeth, you've been, like Pat mentioned, this is your 3rd time with us. The first time we talked about phased planning. We're trying to help business owners kind of get started because, as we talked about during that podcast, the whole process can seem overwhelming. So it's helpful to break it down into phases, and you were fantastic in helping us walk through that. The next time you came in, we talked about succession sales to insiders, and you're also very helpful there. And as we talked about then, that's an area that Pat and I deal with a lot in our practices. So that was really very helpful to listeners. So when Pat and I were talking about how do we wrap up our 2020 podcast season, you just came to our minds as the perfect guest because, your position at BEI, you talk to exit planning professionals, you talk to other professionals, and you talk to business owners. So we just felt like you were the perfect person to give us kind of your macro perspective on what happened in 2020, which was a year that we will never forget, although we'd probably like to. And also, looking ahead, 2021 has got to be better. So we'd like to get your perspective on that also. So in your, just as a quick overview, I mean, what do you think has been most challenging for, you can answer it in two ways. The first will be most challenging for business owners that you've interacted with. And then the second, what's been most challenging for exit advisors in 2020?
Sure. I think that, business owners, from the stories that I'm hearing from their advisors. So as you mentioned, I do talk directly with business owners throughout the year, but even more so than that, I'm having a lot of conversations with people who serve the business community and sort of collecting all of their stories and sort of watching for trends or themes that I think are going on. And, so from what we can tell, the business owners, sort of privately held businesses, which would be sort of small businesses up through kind of lower middle market businesses, lots of the clients that you and I have worked with, they fell into two categories, mostly in 2020. And those were the sort of kicked in the stomach. And the year was just very devastating for them. It was really difficult. And we all know the industries that they were in and some related industries that maybe were a little bit of a surprise. And so that's just been extremely difficult. And then the other group of businesses in 2020 were, I've ended up lumping all of the survive and thrive businesses into one category. It was really kind of fell along that kind of dividing line. You either made it or you didn't. And that's just the stories that I'm hearing from the advisors who kind of try to help support and prop up and creative problem solve and get strategic with their business clients. And everybody I'm talking to has clients in both of those categories. So they're either a survive or thrive, or they're I don't have a word for it, just very, very unfortunate year for a lot of businesses. So we're really concerned about them. And I think, their greatest challenges were along the lines of responsiveness and ability to make changes quickly. Those are the things where being in an industry that was really hit hard was really not the choice of those business owners. It was just sort of the way it came out. And some of the ones that we thought were going to do poorly were able to pivot and do something a little bit different, change their business model a little bit, and maybe get themselves into the survive and thrive category. And those who were all on the edge ended up being sort of having those features in common. Their challenges were, how fast can we change? How flexible can we be? And those who were able to do more, I think, ended the year a little better. And those who were not able to, by circumstance or by decision making, be as quick to respond, really had a very difficult year. I don't know if y'all have seen roughly the same thing in your work, or maybe you've seen something different because of the mix of businesses that you're talking to.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, we've also seen. A lot of my tax clients are professional service companies. So, when things first started hitting February and March, there was a lot of uncertainty. And, it just seemed like there was a lull in activity for a couple of months. But I would say most of my service business clients had their best years ever in a lot of cases, because their revenue, it may have dipped a little bit, but not necessarily much. And their expenses went down dramatically in some cases. We're seeing travel expenses are way down, entertainment expenses are way down, just lots of expenses are down. So we have a lot of clients who, as it turned out, they actually end up having good years from a financial standpoint. The other thing that's impacted them is we have a lot of clients now whose balance sheets look a whole lot better because they were able to take the PPP loan because of the uncertainty that was present in February and March. And then as it turned out, they really didn't need the money. Now, everybody's not out of the woods yet. It's going to be a rough winter, I think. But in that situation, with the latest congressional bill saying that the PPP loan is it's not only is it forgiven, but it's not even taxable income. Our clients who didn't have to spend all that PPP money, it's now on their balance sheet and they don't owe tax on it. And it's just money in the bank. So interestingly enough, for a lot of service businesses, strictly from a financial standpoint, they've had pretty good years. But like you, I've had clients in some of those industries that got hit and they shut their doors. So it's really a matter of the haves and the have-nots to a certain extent. And like you said, in most cases, it has nothing to do with the business itself. It's just the industry you were in.
Yeah, and to your point too, how quickly you were able to change, and you know, those businesses that had the resources and the ability to change the way they do business, really their ability to do things virtually and provide the same level of service to their clients. Those folks because they saw the expenses decrease, just like Walter outlined a few minutes ago. The two things together, they're actually ending up same situation with us. We're seeing clients that actually ended up having a much better year than maybe they even projected at the beginning of the year before COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can say, two different times during the year, I heard two very different stories about roughly the same industry. And that is food distribution. And so at one point during the year, I think the first story was just news coverage talking about food that was needing to be thrown out because the food distribution chain is very well, it's very entrenched in its methods, schedules, patterns, and technology. And there wasn't anything in place. This is in some article I was reading. There wasn't anything in place to provide for flexibility. So farmers have nowhere to send their food. So all the schools and their cafeterias closed, restaurants closed. So all the places where food makers were trying to deliver, were not available. On the other hand, people ate just about as much as they always do, probably more. So food was being consumed in huge quantities in 2020, but there were industries that were just not set up to move things. So I saw that in the news, and I think that, I'm just one of those people who's horrified if you have to throw anything away that's good. So I remembered reading that. And then later I'm in a meeting with an advisor who has a client that's in basically the restaurant business and was in a location, I don't have any memory of where it was, but it was in a city where restaurants were just closed. And maybe there was none of this patio, outdoor dining, things like that. Or they didn't have that kind of space. And they had converted their business into sort of a mini localized food distribution business. They were bringing in, because the restaurants were still sort of had things in motion to order and have delivered pretty large quantities of food. And so they were then redirecting it to places in the community that were having shortages of food. And it worked out really nicely. And they were able to pivot their business from something that was going to kind of ruin them to something that was going to allow them to make money either temporarily, or maybe they'll end up staying in it. And I don't know the answer. So I think those are examples of, the businesses and the industries that were able to make a change did a little better, and not everybody could, but those who could were really changed their outcomes for the year.
And from an advisor perspective, tell us what you saw. What Pat and I did in probably through April, we kind of pivoted our business to, rather than focusing on helping clients prepare their business for exit, we were focusing on helping them survive. So we brought in other experts, some business coaches, people who were expert in walking them through the SBA process, that type of thing. And we did that for about 2 months. And then we switched back to our regular exit planning business. But it still seemed like, a lot of potential clients were really focused on surviving. Is that kind of the way you saw it with your feedback from your other advisors, or what did you see?
I did see a lot of that, Walter, and it was kind of a interesting mix. Though it was a combination of businesses were focused on surviving. Everybody got very intensely focused on whatever was the thing that was most important for them. But because of reduced travel, people being stuck in their empty office or their home office or their basement, wherever they were, owners were easier to get. Businesses just had more time to talk. And I think that business owners spent a lot of time thinking about what was important in 2020. And I talked to a business owner of sort of an electronics distribution company. And they had the same year they were always going to have whoever they serve. Maybe they serve the construction industry, which didn't especially slow down in 2020. And anyway, he said that they had the same year they were planning on having a growth year. Their business is doing great. And one of the things that they did is that they took most of their profits and they gave it to their employees, because that business owner had decided that, for every employee I have who's still employed and still having a regular year, they're under a lot of stress. They represent a household where possibly the other adult in the household isn't having as good of a year, isn't employed, is helping people do school from home, and there's a lot of pressure on people. So I think business owners, the stories that I'm hearing are that they were very focused on their own businesses, but also on their people, and trying to decide what they think is important, how they want to be in retrospect, how do they want to see that they responded to a crisis or an emergency, and they want to be thought of well. And so it was different for every small business, how they felt like they needed to respond or prioritize. I don't think there was too much consistency, but that's the thing that I saw happening. So I agree with you. There's a lot of heavy focus on dealing with PPP and getting things done. But the other thing that was happening was that people were kind of saying, okay, well, I can't do everything. So what can I do? And what do I think is most important? And that was really nice to see.
Yes. And as the years continued on and now coming to a close, have you seen this increase, Elizabeth? Because we have. It seems like more and more business owners, as a result of what they experienced in 2020, are now thinking, do I want to continue to do this, and for how much longer? Do I want to have to go through something like we went through in 2020? And boy, what do I need to do to start planning? And so we've actually seen increased inquiries probably in the last 3 to 4 months. Are you hearing that too from other advisors?
I am, and I'm hearing it in a really interesting way. I can go back to my career goes back at least as far as the .com bubble bursting. And so I was watching clients. I was in private practice at that time, and I was watching clients struggle and fail, and things be very difficult in 2000, 2001. And then I had joined the BEI team by the time the Great Recession came around, 2008, 9, 10. We watched a lot of disruption, and that had its own kind of characteristics. And especially after the Great Recession, and to some extent after the .com bubble bursting, we saw people saying, I don't want to have to do this again, because most of our clients have been in business for quite a while. We do have, a lot of us as planners do have clients that are a little earlier on in their life cycle. So we always have those. Their perspective on massive disruption can be a little bit different, because not as tired or kind of end finish line in sight as some of our more mature businesses. So the mature businesses do say, I don't think I can do this again. It's just too hard. But I've got a few things that I'm noticing that are unique to this disruption. So number one, do we get another 10-year break? I would really like it. And then we'll be all set for whatever's going to happen in 10 years. I'm a little concerned it's going to be shorter than 10 years, given just the way the world is changing so quickly. So we'll have to help our business clients maybe prepare for another big disruption in less than 10 years. I'm hearing a lot of stories about just changing their outcomes completely. So I hear a lot about businesses that were not planning on going to market to find a buyer or a private equity investor have accelerated that process when they really didn't have it on their radar. That's maybe a little bit more traditional. I don't want to do this again. I think I'm going to try to take my chips off the table. But then I'm also hearing some stories about business owners who thought that they were going to go in a particular direction and that has changed. So they were in process to sell their business to an unrelated buyer, a strategic buyer, a financial buyer, a private equity group, and they've changed their mind. And their, adult son or daughter who's back in town and has expressed an interest in the business is the new successor, and we're going to change everything. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard along those lines just in the second half of 2020. So I think that at the same time that businesses are surviving and then trying to decide what's important, I'm seeing a fair amount of kind of jumping the tracks and going off in a different direction than they thought, creating a lot of kind of work for their advisors to do to kind of pivot and make plans for a different outcome. But it's all things that we're well qualified to do. So it's not necessarily a problem. But I really didn't see a lot of sort of exit path changing during and after the Great Recession. It was a lot of hold on, get through it, dig your way out of it, whatever the situation was, and then get back on track and do what you were going to do. But this time I'm seeing people change their mind.
Yes, and as we round the corner here into 2021, we're actually expecting this to be a pretty busy year based on year-end activity and for all the reasons that you just stated there. As you look into 2021, how do you think, what are your thoughts, big picture, as it pertains to the exit planning world? Is it going to look different in this next year, the next couple of years than it has historically?
I think, I do see some changes that I think are going to last for a little while. I think there's going to be a little bit of an increase in, I don't know what I might call financial or fiscal conservatism in the business market. So people not running their margins quite so tight. When you were talking about, balance sheet improvement, I agree, Walter, that's a really common thing, and it's kind of a nice break. So whether it results from just expenses that didn't happen in 2020, or if it's PPP related or whatever it is, I think that we're going to see, at least for a while, people sort of coming to a new comfort level of where they think they need to be in terms of their sort of financial plan for their business, maybe taking a little bit less risk financially. And then I think that the other thing that has just changed probably forever is just sort of the ability, the interest in creating more flexibility in how we operate our businesses and our models. So everything from commercial office leases are changing to human capital sort of structures are changing, technology is changing, and so do we have to meet so much face to face is changing, and I think that is, from what I'm seeing, that's going to continue through 2021 and probably beyond. because of the, sort of slight benefits that we've found we can see going forward to, okay, well, if I have more cash on hand, I can make decisions more quickly. If I have a more flexible HR sort of structure, I can scale up and down based on a project need or a temporary need rather than sort of planning for long term. So I am seeing those kinds of things. I think that will continue through 2021 and beyond, probably.
What are you seeing? One of the things I do is business valuations, and there's been a lot of talk about, what this year is going to do to valuations. But, the industry, the valuation industry, it's, we're used to dealing with unusual events in companies. Companies have unusual events all the time, so you have to normalize out of the valuation. And I think for a lot of companies, that's exactly how it's going to be treated this whole COVID year. You'll just kind of make normalizing adjustments. But clearly there could be companies where they've proven to be more risky, so their valuations could go down. So, maybe a company has concentration of supplier or concentration of customers. And that's the type of thing that in the COVID experience made them a lot more vulnerable, I believe. So, I could see some valuations going down just because weaknesses were exposed. But at the same time, now that the weaknesses are exposed, the business owner, if he has the appropriate window before he exits, he's got time to turn those into strengths, which could end up, being a blessing in disguise. So I think it's just very interesting how this is all going to play out.
Right. And I do think those businesses that are willing to give themselves 3 or 5 or 7 years to kind of make some systemic changes and plan for either a future transition or just a delegation of responsibility to a management team or something like that. Those that are willing to give themselves a little bit of time are the ones that are gonna have a more successful future overall because of those things that you mentioned. And so they're going to be able to put some decisions in play that could take, they could take a little bit of time to kind of improve themselves, but these exposed weaknesses that you mentioned are really kind of, if we did get into the survive and thrive category, they're kind of a blessing. It shows us where we need to make some changes. And those are all things that can be addressed and managed. So I think with a more sort of complete set of, ideas about what the vision is for the future and what we need to look like in 3 or 5 years or even 2 years, there's a lot of improvements that can be made, and we can really turn those valuations around, I think.
Yeah. So in our closing minutes here, Elizabeth, let's do 2 things. I want to have a conversation between the 3 of us and just come up with like 3 steps or something that business owners can do in the first 90 days of 2021 to get started planning. But first, we've been talking a lot about business owners. There are some advisors who listen to this podcast as well. What do you think advisors should be thinking about doing to prepare for 2021 in certain business?
I've been having a lot of conversations with advisors, since that's most of my time is spent with them, and the theme that I'm hearing, and this includes from the most successful firms that I'm talking to, is a shift away from individual advisors and also larger firms or organizations or groups, a shift away from trying to fill too many seats at an advisory table. So I'm seeing them say, well, I used to lead a planning process and coordinate the advisor team. And I also did the valuation. And I also was the business consultant or coach. And I also designed their top management key employee incentive plan. And I also, and so on. And what I'm hearing from the most successful firms, and none of them know each other, and none of them know that they're all telling me the same thing. So I think this is just a real and natural shift, is that the best advisors are sort of backing off of that, trying to be everything to every client. And they're kind of reducing the number of seats at the table where they really emphasize their deep expertise. So they tend to stay in the coordination role because that's where you can actually do the most good for your clients. So most of the people I'm talking to, and of course the tools that BEI provides really support that. So that's probably why I'm talking to these people. It's not because it's magical or anything, but they're going to stay in this role of coordinating other advisors and making sure that business owners' plans get developed and designed and implemented so that something actually happens. But then they are not playing so many different roles on the team. They're really delegating that out and making sure that they bring in other experts. Even if they have the knowledge to do something, they're just going to choose to not do it. So they're really going to focus. That's what I'm seeing as the number one sort of comment that I've gotten from advisors and firms for 2021.
Yeah, that's good. I think Walter and I can relate to that completely. As a matter of fact, I sought out Scott Barth this past week, who you know, of course.
Right.
And we're talking about synergy between our two firms with the work that he does in evaluating team members, the assessments that he's so deep in and has so much experience in. And of course, as you know, you both know that building the management team, the next level management team is a key value driver to building value. And so that's often exposed as an area that needs help. And so we want to work with someone like Scott who can come in and do that piece and do it extremely well. So no, completely understand what you're talking about there and align with it. Okay, so in closing minutes, both of you, let's do this. Let's come up with, a first 90 days. If we're going to recommend to business owners who are listening, as 2021 gets started, our constant refrain here, Elizabeth, like it is with you, is plan now, get started. And so how can we help them get started as we make the turn here into 2021? Let me just outline, I have three things here. I want you two to respond to these three ideas and either add or modify. First, number one, let's do a financial gap analysis, which would include a current estimate of value of the business, particularly coming out of COVID. Let's find out what the business is really worth. And then let's get a current financial needs analysis. Meaningful planning requires accurate data. So let's make sure that we've got current and accurate data as to how much the business is worth and how much we're going to need when we leave the business, whenever that might be. So let's do that financial gap analysis. Let's review our plan for the unexpected events of death and disability, because those, Walter and I, just like you, Elizabeth, sadly were privy to, a few stories this past year where sudden death usually. And so let's review our plan for that. And this can be easily done by either reviewing or creating what we would call business continuity instructions, which of course you're very familiar with. It's just written instructions to whoever's left behind, all short-term critical information that needs to be considered as well as long-term to keep the business continuing until the family or the estate has an opportunity to do whatever the estate planning documents would instruct for the business. And then number three, let's identify one action to improve business transferable value, focusing on earnings, growth, and de-risking the business. So keeping it simple, just a few simple things for 90 days, financial gap analysis, review your plan for the unexpected, and identify just one action that you can take over 90 days to improve the value of your business. What would you two say in addition to that, or modify it? Any added advice?
I'm going to say that I completely agree with all of those three things. So I would not recommend taking those off of the 90-day plan. And I think that all three of the things you mentioned can be accomplished in, I mean, maybe as little as, an hour of focused attention per week in the first 90 days of the year. It's not a massive undertaking. And all three of us actually are big fans of, sort of baby steps and breaking things into smaller pieces that are more manageable. I myself am sort of a victim of, just sort of freezing and not knowing what to do when something seems too big. So I'm a huge supporter of breaking things down. And I think those are three things that a person could focus on and do in a small amount of time when they're very, very busy. But the travel and vacation and going places situation is not likely to change dramatically in the first 90 days of 2021. And so I think it's a really good opportunity to work on those. My added color might be that I think for all three of the things that you mentioned, so that's figuring out the financial gap. If somebody doesn't know what that is, they can ask Pat and Walter. Figuring out the continuity or sort of the emergency plan and figuring out one thing to build value. I would like for business owners to think of those three things in the context of what they want their relationship with their business to be now and going forward. So maybe, what do you love about being a business owner? What do you love about what you do? Maybe make a list of what you hate about what you do, and then use those kind of clarifying feelings to make some decisions. Okay, it affects my financial gap. Like, how much do I really need? What do I want from my business, and what do I want to be doing when I'm finished with my business, whenever that's going to be? So that affects your financial gap. It affects continuity. If I'm not around, who are the people that are going to do things, and am I taking the steps I need to take to make them be successful in those activities? And one thing I can do to build value in my business is so that it can be the kind of business that I'm proud of and that I'm able to either keep long term or transition out of, whatever my choice is. So I think business owners setting their own sort of personal list of what they want to see and what they don't want to do for the medium and long term is a great way to sort of put these three action items in 2021 into perspective. And then I'll pass to Walter, see what he would add.
Thanks. Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you two have said. I think the only other thing I would add, and this, I think Elizabeth was kind of saying this a little bit, but it's a good opportunity for business owners to kind of step back, and, they've been forced to make a lot of changes in their business because of this situation, but a lot of them have been very positive changes. So I think they need to step back and see what has really worked, even if they wouldn't have necessarily be doing it, what has worked, and find a way to really make sure that they stick with that as things get back to normal, hopefully. It's also a great time to take a look at your employees and see, who really stepped up and showed you a different side of themselves during this crisis. Because, this is a great opportunity for people to show their true colors. They're out, a lot of them are on their own. Are they productive on their own? Are they the type of people who are always complaining about the situation? Or have they stepped up? Have they offered ways to make it better? Have they, done things personally to make it better? So I think it's been a great opportunity to really take a look at, who you consider to be a key employee, and did they show themselves to be a key employee in the midst of this situation, or have other people stepped up? So I think if they can step back and try to identify, the positives that have possibly come out of this situation and incorporate that going forward, I think that's going to help grow value in the business.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so Elizabeth, as we close here, as Walter closes us here in a couple minutes, he's going to ask you if there's anything for you that you'd like to promote today. We actually have exitreadiness.com. If listeners go there and use this code 2021 exclamation mark as the discount code, they can get 15% off of the business continuity plan for the unexpected. These are virtual resources, by the way. Everything's done virtually. And off of one exit action in 90 days. Those two products to help you get to, they're simple, minimal investments of both time and money, but they can help you get started and act on these few things, the bits of advice we've given you here in the last few minutes. One, exit action in 90 days, business continuity, a plan for the unexpected, discount code 2021 exclamation mark. Walter, you want to close us out?
Certainly. So Elizabeth, thanks again for joining us. Always great to have you. And like you said, it's just, just talking amongst friends. So it's always great to have you. It's fun. And I'm predicting that at some point during 2021, you're going to become the first 4-time appearance person in the history.
It'd be a great honor. Can't wait.
We'll look forward to that. Is there anything that you want to promote today for BEI?
I don't have a catchy discount code. I would just say, BEI's mission is to help business owners benefit from their life's work. So we do that through advisors and firms who help them directly and do a great job creating custom outcomes. So if you're a business owner and you're listening, just ask your most trusted advisor if they have access to BEI resources. They're easy for your advisor to get. They're super helpful, and they're all intended to help create a custom outcome for every business client. So if you're a business owner, just ask your advisor if they have access to BEI tools. Ask Walter and Pat if they can help you with just one thing about your business. If you're an advisor, then just go to exitplanning.com and see what we can do to help you out. Our job is to make your job easier and better. We'd love to help.
Yeah, and speaking from experience, and I'll speak for Pat, I'll talk to advisors who are listening to this podcast. BEI's website is fantastic. The information out there is fantastic. The people are fantastic. So I can't recommend any higher than I possibly could that advisors should be looking at BEI and joining. So
I appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Certainly. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860. You can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can access resources, as Pat said, at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. Thanks for listening. And until next year, I guess, everybody have a happy new year. And we will see you in 2021 at the Exit Readiness Podcast. This is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.